Hi, this is Chris Carolyn, spiralcalendar.com. Recording this in January 2020. It's a discussion about the long waves model of long-term secular price moves, and then my own interpretation of what the drivers of those long wave cycles are. And then a question I've been asking over the last 12 months here and there is, what effect does all the central bank intervention have on the long wave cycles? Do they eliminate them? Do they suppress them? Do they postpone them? And then finally, in part two of this video, we'll look at actual timing of what I think the next secular transitions, and particularly the eventual impending rise in interest rates and fall in equity prices. But let's begin at the beginning with the long waves model. The seasonal long waves model, and I started following this with the late P.Q. Wall, who was quite a character. And then in the late 1990s, there was a long waves discussion group. It was a very good discussion group hosted at the University of Colorado on a listserv. Number of participants, and the gist of it is that there is a very large and this is really similar to the Kondratiev wave. General price cycle. Prices go up, and price of money is one of those prices. So that's interest rates. Price of money goes up, and then the price of money goes down. Then within that long cycle, the equity markets actually bifurcate into two cycles. And they really reflect the seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And so in the springtime, inflation, prices are rising, but they're rising mildly, and that's conducive for growth, so stocks do well. When inflation begins to get out of control, that heats up, that's summer, and then prices of equities fall while the price of money, i.e. bonds, is falling also. At the peak of the price cycle is the end of the summer and transition into fall. And then the fall period, we have disinflation. The price increases are cooling off, and that is once again favorable to equities, and they rise at the same time interest rates fall. And then comes the winter, prices keep falling, a deflationary environment ensues, growth is impaired, and equities fall alongside of interest rates. So that's a general model. Nothing new here, and nothing new from my perspective. So now the next chart just shows this cycle and how it's played out over really most of the 20th century. And you can see the transitions from spring to summer in 1901, a low around 1921 in equities, and the 1929, the 20s, the roaring 20s was a fall period. And then the winter was the Depression. And then spring, the 50s and 60s, tremendous growth, but then inflation started to get out of control in the 70s. Prices kept rising, and that's the summer period. And then once interest rates peak, it's good for stocks again, and then rates were falling and stocks were rising. So that is the model, the long waves model in general. And of course, then in most recent years, central banks have been having their effect with their own manipulation. This chart, in a sense, just breaks it down and puts it into a cobweb form. Brian Berry's book, Long Wave Rhythms in Economic Development, featured this chart, but I've added some dates to it. And it's really the same thing, but the up-down scale is prices rising and falling, and the left-right is growth falling and growth rising, and you can see the four different seasonal components. Now let's look a little bit closer at some of the individual peaks in it, and you can see that some of these transitions, they're actually separated by about 7 to 8 years. They're really double tops and double bottoms, and we had a pair of the 29 and 37 were two separate peaks separated by 8 years. 66, 73, there's a 6-year separation. 2000 to 2007, there was a 7-year. 74 to 82, a 7-year. And this is a fairly regular pattern, but nothing's perfect. There are other things always influencing markets. There's no absolute roadmap. I don't subscribe to that. But uh, the evidence is compelling. Now, my explanation for this timing, and you'll also notice, 29 to 66, 37 years, 37 to 73, 36 years, and there is a regular cycle there. This is my theory now of what is driving the long waves, and it's really eclipse-based cycles. Now, a Saros period is 18 years, and so every 18 years an eclipse is very similar to the one that came 18 years prior. And 2 times the Saros is 36 years, and that seems to be the building block. And that 36-year building block is harmonic with the 27th spiral calendar unit, which is 35.8 years. And it seems to be that joint harmony of those two cycle periods that are the main driver. Eclipses are layered on top of one another. And my hypothesis at the time, back in the long waves group, I remember what got me going was Arch Crawford. There was some eclipse and Arch Crawford was talking about Pluto or something, and I'm like rolling my eyes and thinking, well, if eclipses have anything to do with it, it should be the eclipses that are strongest. In other words, they're the most central in terms of how the Earth and Moon and Sun are all aligning. But those central eclipses come and go. In other words, so a specific Saros will start as partial eclipses, and then will move into the center, and then move away. So we're always shifting from one set of important Saros cycles to a second set, and whatever. And that's what this shows. And the average period between Saros cycles is 29 years. So if you subtract the 36 years of the 2 times Saros from the 29 years of the staggering of the Saros, there is that 7-year twin tops and twin bottoms. And so this chart here lays it out. Now, the original chart I published here was in 2002, and you can see we actually came close, but it was off by a little bit. The expected 2002 top, which was actually expected late in '01, that came in early. Everything came in about 2 years early. The '09 low occurred. That was the expected '11 low. And then the expected '09 top was really the '07 top. But the model held in terms of the general efficacy, and we did get twin tops 7 years apart in 2000 and 2007. So that was a nice validation of my ideas. Now, moving on to the spiral calendar, and the central banks have just thrown this huge monkey wrench into the thing, printing money wildly, and their attempts to print money have been about attempting to prevent the winter cycle of the long wave. And if they threw enough money at it, they would avoid the deflationary collapse. That's clearly been what they've been doing. So part of my question is, are these cycles non-existent? Well, some good validation occurred in 2015, because here, the F27, remember this is 35.8 years, that measure from the gold top would be expected to be a gold low, a secular bottom. And it actually came in. Now, it came in 12 days later than the calculation. And that's remarkable precision, although if you've read the book that I wrote nearly 30 years ago, I sort of was expecting precision even better than that. But now, when a 36-year cycle hits within 12 days, you kind of go, okay, this is pretty good. But we can also see the effects of what the central banks did, and that is the price low that did form in gold was much higher because of this general money printing. And if you followed my work over the last 12 months, a lot of people were looking for big drops in gold, and to me, the fact that the spiral calendar low was in place said, no, gold is done on the downside, and we've seen the central bank's ability and the bullion bank's ability to smash gold lower has really been reduced over the last number of months. They've still been able to somewhat keep a lid on it, but they can no longer push it around like they used to. And I think that's, put your finger up to the wind, and you can sense the change there. Now, so what does this mean about the long wave? And the interest rates are bonkers. The interest rate low we would have expected never happened because they've just kept a lid on them. So this winter cycle it's fueled stocks. We're still, the central banks can still affect things, because in the sense that if they stop printing money, that deflationary collapse will occur. That has been postponed, and that winter cycle, which seemingly ended with the gold low, and everything else has been distorted, will come around and bite them. But what happens if they keep printing? And and I think that's what happened, because, we've seen time and time again, every time markets just get a little bit nervous or a little bit something, they just throw more buckets. They aren't going to bite the bullet and walk away from the money printing. They're just going to keep cranking it up. So, but what does that mean for the cycle and the long wave? And here, I call this the central bank shortcut. And I think that what we get is, they will avoid the winter. It won't come. But what will also happen is we won't get spring either. And spring is that healthy, low inflationary environment that's good for the economy. And instead, what I call the central bank shortcut here on the berry cobweb, we just go right up to the transition from spring to summer, and inflation just explodes, and then that means we get a stock market top while inflation takes off in a hurry, and at the same time prices are rising, so interest rates are going up too. And so the central banks will be successful in avoiding winter, and the price they pay is we don't get, we're getting economic cyclic climate change in a sense, because we're just going to get right into the hot stuff. So there's an overview of the long waves and where I think we are now, and how the central bank, what they've been doing, how that has distorted both not just rates, but also equities, and how the cycle still is very evident in the price of gold. In the second part of this video, which will be only for subscribers, I'm going to talk about the timing, and because the spiral calendar has been so effective on timing the big events. That was always the promise of the approach. It's not necessarily a useful tool day in and day out, but when things get irrational or the major turns occur, that's the time to start pulling out that approach, the spiral calendar. And it showed itself because it nailed that gold low, which is now obviously a very important long-term low on the chart. It's showing up that way. And I think the real validation for the spiral calendar was when the Bitcoin mania in 2017 formed a perfect spiral. It conformed to all the geometry shown in the book, the distances, the orientation to the calendar, the timing of the top, and the rest is history. So if you want to know what it's saying here about the impending bull market top in stocks, you'll want to watch video number 2 in this series. Thank you and good evening.